Welcome to our Fire Up Weekly Wednesday webinar sponsored by Newfields Ag, where we bring innovations in your fields. We encourage you to visit our full service website at newfieldsag.com, where you'll find a complete listing of Newfields Ag products, product descriptions, videos, application and use instructions, and contact information for our sales reps and our internal team. So thank you for registering and joining us today. And as always, we ask you place your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and we'll try to get these questions answered that you may have as we go through the presentation. So today I'm your host, Michael Musselman, one of the owners of Newfields Ag, and today's focus will be on our BioStealth with Provid-R product, brought to us in conjunction with New Leaf Symbiotics. And joining us this morning is Allison Jack, Roger Bowman, and Mark Heinrich from the New Leaf team. And so we really look forward to speaking with our friends here at New Leaf again. And we've worked extensively with New Leaf Symbiotics for over 4 years to develop, basically reinvent and develop the planter box market with a focus of using pink methylotropes as one of the key controls. And so the exciting thing we're talking about today is an EPA registered biopesticide that helps with corn rootworm mitigation. Jack is a chief scientist at New Leaf and very knowledgeable with the experience of helping us bring this technology to market. And so we're excited to have Allison here today. We're just going to let Allison introduce herself and take off with the presentation. Morning, Allison.
Morning, Michael. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and share our pink performance technology with you guys today. And yeah, it's been a wild ride developing this one. You guys did our first on-farm trial, I remember. Right. Here we go. The slides look okay? Assuming that's a yes.
Yeah, they look good. They look good,
Great.
Allison.
Okay. So I'm Allison Jack, Product Technical Director at New Leaf Symbiotics. I'm very happy to share our BioStealth story with you guys today. So I'm going to go through our on-farm testing from 2023 and 2024, and then really do a deep dive on how BioStealth works. This is a very unique biocontrol technology. So we're going to go through some data possibly you've seen before from last season, but also a lot of new data because we've learned a lot more about this product over the past year. And then I'll cover some 2024 case studies and also touch a little bit on application tips. So again, this product came out of 7 years of small plot testing. We were under a 10-acre cap for regulatory reasons, which meant we were limited to small plot testing until 2023. So in 2023, we really took this product and soft launched it, tracked how it was doing on farm, and then also again in 2024. So we're so happy to share with you what we know now about this on-farm performance. So we've had 81 on-farm trials. These are 10 acres or larger comparisons. And this is testing Provid-R, which is the biostimulant, with BioStealth, which is the EPA registered bioinsecticide. And what we see over all this testing, again, this is 8 states, all in corn rootworm hotspots. And we really focused on, corn on corn areas and fields where people knew they had pressure and had pressure pretty consistently. So we got a good look across the corn rootworm hotspots. And what we found is a 5.6 bushel per acre performance. and then a win performance of 9. So that means where it did win, the average performance is 9 bushels. That win rate is 72%. Again, fantastic for a biological. And we're up to 81 trials now as we're tracking this product's performance. We do expect more data to come in. Some was slow coming in from the 2024 season, so we'll keep this updated throughout the season when new information comes in. So how can a live biological provide this kind of benefit to corn? How does this technology work? So at New Leaf, we focus on pink pigmented facultative methylotrophs, which is a mouthful, so we just call them PPFMs for short. We have a collection of 12,000 of these microbes in our freezer, and we've been kind of mining it for desired impacts when you apply these microbes to plants. PPFMs are unique bacteria that are plant symbionts, and they provide a range of benefits. And what we've seen in our collection, and of course also in the scientific literature, is there really are different types of benefits when you take one species or one isolate of PPFM and apply it to a plant. So we have, classic biostimulant where we have improved emergence and stand establishment, increased crop yield. That's our Provid-R Corn, our corn biostimulant, which launched a few years before the corn rootworm BioStealth. Also, PPFMs can help with nutrient acquisition. This is kind of part of the biostimulant story because we do see nutrient uptake with Provid-R. And then we have a whole selection of microbes in our collection that can help with nitrogen utilization. We also are now putting some effort into characterizing some PGR qualities in a certain subset of our collection. And then, of course, today we'll be focused on the biocontrol mode of action with PPFMs. And again, these are pretty unique. It's not your classic biocontrol. So we'll go into a bit on what do we mean when we're talking about ISR? What is this induced systemic resistance, and how can it provide a benefit to corn? So plants have basically their own immune system. It's not as complex as mammal immune systems, but they do have the ability to defend themselves from pests and pathogens. So the main types of plant defense responses are SAR, which is systemic acquired resistance. That's that on the left there with the red arrow. So if you have a pathogen that comes onto a leaf, starts an infection, the plant can send a distress signal to newly forming leaves to say, oh, you better watch out. You better do things like increase your cell wall, make more wax on the outside, maybe send some oxidative bursts to try and physically or chemically fight these bacteria that are attacking you. There's also herbivore-induced resistance. That's the blue arrow on the right side there, where once you start to have herbivory, same thing, the plant can send a distress signal to other parts and other leaves to say, oh, you better be ready. We're under attack. You better upregulate some of these defenses. And then there's induced systemic resistance. This is unique in that it doesn't require the presence of the pest or the pathogen. It allows the plant to be prepared beforehand just in case. So those are those purple arrows there. So a beneficial microbe in the root zone colonizing the plant can actually turn on this defense response so that the plant is primed and ready in case any damage occurs later in the season. So this is kind of a schematic of what that looks like, right? So on the x-axis here, we have time, the whole entire cropping season. And on the y-axis, that's the activity of the defense genes in the plant. So you'll see when there's no priming, the plant just goes along, the corn rootworm larvae start feeding mid-season. It will defend itself, but you'll get a slower and a smaller defense response, which can lead to more damage and a less desirable outcome for the crop. In the context of priming, it's almost like a vaccine, right? Where these microbes, when they're applied to the plant at planting, you can measure a little tick of defense activity that then turns off for the rest of the season, but it flipped some switches inside the plant. So the second that the first corn rootworm larvae starts feeding on the roots, this plant can mount a much faster and a much stronger response, which can lead to a better outcome for the crop. So there are a couple parts that I'm going to focus on today. Here's where you get your defenses primed. You flip that switch and the plant is in ready mode. And then what we've found now specifically with BioStealth is a defense compound that the plant can produce that repels feeding. And then also a second mode of action where the roots can regrow more after damage. So we'll go into those here. So thinking about BioStealth, what we found out early on in the development of this product is, contrary to what you would expect with a bioinsecticide, there's really no direct impact on the larvae. You can feed them this bacteria. It does not make them sick, but it's an indirect mode of action. So once BioStealth colonizes the plant, it primes those plant defenses and improves root structure, stimulates regrowth after damage. And then number 3 there, that primed state means that the plant itself can produce a compound that basically disrupts larval feeding. So we'll go into that in detail here. So the first part, BioStealth primes those plant defenses. Again, 7 years of small plot testing with this product. Our R&D team went out in 2019, dug up a bunch of roots in late July, right when our contract research organization was raiding these roots for corn rootworm damage. And they asked the question, what genes are turned on in the system? Can we measure anything different about the plants that were treated with BioStealth versus just the plants that were growing there? And they were able to find a core number of genes that were turned on only when BioStealth was present. And those were all very interesting. As soon as we looked at the list of what those genes do, you're like, this all looks very relevant to what we've seen with the control over all of these years. So I'll first focus on the genes that are part of a pathway that produces a repellent compound. Our R&D team collaborated with Mizzou and the USDA. They spent, it's now been 2 years, trying to track down this story and really flush it out and figure out what's going on in a detailed way. So how can a live bacteria colonizing a plant actually decrease larval feeding? So this is an artist's rendering. This is from our great video that'll be, when the deck goes out, we have some sales resources or just product technical positioning resources in the appendix. One of those is this great video. It really does almost mask the root system. So it creates a situation where the larvae are present. They do hatch, they're alive, but they cannot find the roots. So in a normal scenario, how do corn rootworm larvae find the corn roots to feed on? Well, that's through carbon dioxide. It's underground, it's dark, they can't see the roots, but they can chemically sense the carbon dioxide that's released from the roots through root respiration. And then they'll migrate over and start feeding. What our collaborators did is what's called a feeding choice assay, where you can have different treatments on either side, little tiny neonate larvae, which are so tiny they have to be moved with a like a watercolor brush. They're placed in the middle of that system, and they're given about a half an hour in the dark to decide which way they want to go. And then once the experiment's harvested, you can look, okay, well, how many are on this root over here, and how many are on this root over here, and then how many of them maybe didn't even choose a root. So in this feeding choice assay, again, which was repeated multiple times, we saw a strong preference with the larvae that they will go to the untreated root. So these were seeds that were treated with BioStealth, grown up to a certain height, and then placed into this apparatus where the larvae are placed in the middle and they get to decide where they want to go. The video is great. You can actually see Some of the larvae would crawl over to the biostealth side, get excited about it, sniff it, and then kind of turn around and go the other direction. So there's something that is telling them not to go over here. And then they did what's called a non-choice experiment. What if you have biostealth treated on both sides? What happens to the larvae then? And the answer was they kind of just wander around in the middle and they never choose a root system at all. So this really was great to see, and this team is following up to try to document what those volatile compounds might be. So those are chemicals that are airborne that are produced by the corn roots themselves, but are produced in higher quantity when the root is treated with biostealth. So a lot more to come from that story, and we're working on a scientific publication as well with our collaborators. So that's not the only mode of action. That's definitely part of this story, but what we also see is that biostealth improves root development. So what does that look like? Again, back to this study looking at what genes are turned on in the system, we also found genes that are controlling root architecture and different kinds of stress signaling. So we did a case study, as Michael mentioned, right? Like Newfields Ag has been a strong partner in field development of these technologies. Our very first on-farm trial of biostealth was through Newfields Ag customer, and we were graciously invited into the field to kind of just dig up a bunch of roots and see if we could figure out what was going on. We saw enough of interest that season that in 2024, we pulled out all the stops. We took this back to the small plot design so that we could get a fully replicated study and try and look at these changes in root architecture. So here's what we found. Again, we would have loved more pressure in this study, but we did have enough pressure to be above the economic threshold. So again, those nodal injury scores go from 0 to 3. 0.25 is considered at economic threshold, and we were at 0.26. But I am happy to say that the whole team that was washing the roots, they were double-blinded, but the team was able to say, oh, I think that's your treatment. And they were right. So it was still visible to the eye that the roots looked different, even though the pressure was low. So here's what we found. If we looked at the crown, so this is a bottom-up view of the full mature root system in early August, we saw some positive trends in surface area and volume of the overall root system. And then we went in for each root and dissected out every single node. And then you see that photo up there on the right, we re-photographed all of the roots from each node so you could see more detail, because you saw in those crowns, there's a lot going on there and it's hard to tease apart. So if you look here, we tracked this phenomenon by node. So in this case, we did not see any enhancement at node 6. But at node 5, we started to see positive trends in root tips and total root length, and also at nodes 4. Why are root tips important? That's where all the action is. All of the nutrient uptake happens in the root hairs, which are only transiently formed right behind the root tip. And then what we saw in nodes 1 to 3 is a very strong response. We saw statistical differences in total root length, and most of that was in those fine roots. So roots that have a diameter of 0 to 0.5 millimeters. So we were very happy to see this, and yeah, look forward to learning more about how our PPFM technology can impact overall root architecture. Now, that's one part of it, the second part of it. So the third part of it, there is actually a third mode of action here. For years with our small plot researchers, they would tell us, hey, we love working with you. Your technology is very interesting. Man, if we don't get to the field right away to do the rating, where they actually have to dig up, pressure wash each root and try and find where the nodal pruning occurred, they would always tell us, oh, you had to peel back all of this kind of bushy growth to even see where the rootworm damage was. And of course, in the back of our minds, all of those years, we're like, well, that sounds like maybe a good thing, right? It sounds like maybe our treatment is really ramping up potentially regrowth or overall growth. So this was something that we also looked at in the on-farm case study through the Newfields Ag Network in 2023, and then we followed up again in 2024. So when the larvae damage the roots, plants have something called compensatory regrowth. They'll just do that naturally. If something happens and they lose part of a root or a root is heavily damaged, they will attempt to regrow from above that site of damage. But what we believe now, and the data that we're assembling really shows that BioStealth increases that regrowth to a pretty impressive extent, to where you see those roots labeled in pink there. Yeah, full nodal pruning, the root was fully damaged, but then a bunch of really aggressive bushy regrowth happened above that site of damage, which we believe really helps, obviously, with standability, specifically with corn rootworm. So what we saw here, again, low pressure, but at economic threshold. So we saw a lot of larval tunneling and larval pruning. Once we dissected all these roots, we went back to the dissected roots and we inspected each one. And we said, okay, does this have larval tunneling or larval nodal pruning? Yes or no? And if it did, we photographed those again individually to try and get a sense of, okay, are we actually seeing more regrowth here? And the answer was yes. So in the BioStealth treated roots, we saw an increase in total root tips, total root length, and again, that strongest effect was observed in nodes 1 through 3, with 24% more root tips and 15% more total root length. So we really have multiple things going on here. Again, BioStealth has no direct negative impact on the larvae. It operates through an indirect mode of action, which increases the plant's own defense response. So it primes those responses. It improves root structure, stimulates root regrowth after damage, and then those defense responses really impact the way the larvae can even find the roots to feed in the first place. So we did a fun collaboration with Extreme Ag last season. You guys may have seen some of this on social media. I really want to highlight this as some great resources as you're reaching out to customers and potential customers. We did a ton of videos. It was so fun to be in the field with this team. It was great to see live their surprise at, oh my gosh, what is going on? This technology is really doing something, and you can see it very early season. So I got the chance to visit both of these trials multiple times throughout the season and really get these, NCGA winners, like they really monitor closely their crops, and what they were able to observe and share with us was really fun. So we had 2 case studies, one with Kelly Garrett in Dow City, Iowa. He's corn on corn. He had low pressure this season, but he did have pressure. What he really noticed was better standability. We saw less green snap, and then just general benefits from that enhanced early rooting. So he had a plus 2.7 in his case study. And then Temple Roads in Centerville, Maryland, he had no corn rootworm pressure at all, but he saw other benefits from those root architecture changes. And he's got super sandy soils out there, right? And he saw a plus 12. So they were both really keen to see this interesting technology, and we learned a lot from trialing it with them. So yeah, there's a lot of videos and photos. So all of those will be in the appendix that you can share with folks as you're talking about this technology. Yeah, it was fun. Kelly chose these roots himself, and he was like, whoa, that they really look really different. So yeah, just those massive root structures, and a lot of fine roots too. That's really visible just if you dig it and look. And that's what I would encourage. If you have a new customer that's trying it for the first time, or even someone that's a repeat customer, encourage them to go out and dig some roots. We didn't even pressure wash these. We just used like a hose, and you can really see the differences. So that's something that, yeah, if you've got a grower that's interested in something new, it's a great way to see the responses below ground. Again, in the sandy soils, it was It was a pretty intense rooting effect. Temple again dug these himself to make sure I wasn't putting my finger on the scale. And yeah, he was surprised to see this much change in root development. And in his case, he had applied anhydrous at maybe 9 inches below the surface. And his message to me was, wow, I mean, with your product, these plants were able to reach that, where with my grower standard practice, they were barely even accessing that nitrogen. And who knows if there was some nitrogen loss as well. So a couple of tips on application. We wanted to share, we now have our product is stable for 2 years at room temperature. Our product development team is working really hard on making improvements on already great formulation. And then we also wanted to share an update here is that our on-seed stability with the planter box application is now 6 months. And our PD team is now working on other things. They say we don't even track it after 6 months because we can't imagine that anyone would maybe want to apply it that early. But there's a lot of flexibility to apply this product before planting, quite a bit before planting or at planting. So let's see, with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Allison, thanks for that wonderful update. Right now, there's different ways to engage with us, and going and looking at some of that information online is can and is really helpful. And so, are you able to show kind of those summaries of the biocontrol aspects for yield from the aggregates that you've discussed in the past a little further? And talking about, what we're seeing over a period of time with those win rates and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really consistent response. So with when we're in the small plots, we can go out and have our research partners, dig and wash and really rate the roots so we have a very solid sense of pressure. When we're out in the field, obviously it's a range of different pressures. We rely on the grower or the partner placing the trial to really report back, okay, do you think this was like low, medium, or high pressure? So it was definitely done under a range of corn rootworm pressure, but those were targeted in hot spots and in corn on corn. So, a 70% win rate for a biological is just phenomenal. And we really feel this is a solid tool in the toolbox for IPM strategies on corn rootworm management. And that data set represents a lot of different things that people were trying, right? Maybe they're trying on a traded background and it would be grower standard practice and then grower standard practice plus the BioStealth. Or maybe they were trying on a non-traded background and the grower standard practice was, in-furrow granular insecticides and then with BioStealth on top of that. So we really do recommend this again with providers. So all of that on-farm testing was the two together. And we really do feel that they're a strong combination of products. And we do have an updated aggregate for provider. We're now up to, and sorry, I just did it yesterday. So we're now up to 4 years of testing, 227 trials on provider, and that's also a 70% win rate. It's a 4.9 bushel per acre advantage for overall, and then where it does win, it's an 8.5. So those represent a larger swath of the corn belt, both in and outside of corn rootworm hotspots. But for all of the on-farm testing that we've done with BioStealth, we really focused on corn rootworm hotspots to get a sense of what kind of a benefit you can see under pressure.
So this stacking of those two technologies really gives us an opportunity to hit on all the fronts that you mentioned about, and some of the practical aspects in the field that we're seeing. We might have a couple of testimonials if someone wants to raise their hand on experience. Let us know in the chat, and we can bring you on. One person has asked, "Have you done any?"
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. One person asked, have you done any testing with just the TS201 as a solo liquid seed treatment to see its effects?
That's a great question. So in those 7 years of on-farm, or sorry, in the 7 years of small plot testing, we were looking at it as a liquid seed treatment or as an in-furrow treatment. Those were in the early days when we hadn't even dreamed up planter box. So yes, I will say the caveat is if BioStealth is used on its own, you see a great response when there's pressure, but BioStealth is not a biostimulant. In the absence of corn rootworm feeding pressure, there is no biostimulant type yield benefit. And that's why we kind of recommend that these two products go out together. Corn rootworm pressure is hard to predict. So you want that as an insurance policy, but you also want to have a good experience where, okay, well, if I didn't have any corn rootworm pressure, I still want to be able to see a yield bump. And that's where the biostimulant comes in. So we started testing those together in the program, very early on. Yeah.
So one of the things that you talked about is this win rate, and a 70% win rate is an amazing win rate for a product. And I liken this always to in the seed business, if we have a hybrid or variety that wins 70% of the time, and whether it's a new or an old technology, we plant that, our customers use it, they're interested in accessing it to see and to try. And so this meets that metric where a Newfields Ag to advanced products, we need a 70 to 80% win rate and a 2 to 3x ROI, and we meet that with this product. And this whole subject of integrated pest management as we go forward is interesting because we know that traits and chemistries are not doing the work as well as that they may be used to. Zero tolerance of feeding when the corn rootworm trait first arrived on the market was what it was supposed to be, and 30 years later, there's gaps in that cry protein. And so, with this introduction of a third level in a sense of control, so traits, chemistries, and now biologies to be able to stack and give options to farmers, it may allow them to use some hybrids that they may not have chosen in the past. Maybe go back to a double type of trait if they think that's the right thing for the right genetics on the farm. And it's helping us with these non-GMO farmers also who are still wanting to use conventional hybrids and have that chemistry control, but want to add the next level. And so we're seeing this adopted at the rate of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres here. And so, Brian, I wanted to ask you if you could mention one of the local farmers and what they did with regards to blocking this product in a field and what they found with corn rootworm pressure control and spraying.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've in Eastern Iowa, we get the privilege of having Northerns, Easterns, and Southerns. They all come to roost here and have a fun time, and we get different hatchings and releases of those as we go forward. And so last year we had a gentleman that purchased the BioStealth and Provider PM product and put it in the middle of a field so that he could test it in the harshest conditions possible. And his comment was that the first time he went out and did a post spraying, when he got to the section that his map showed that he changed hybrids and went to the treated hybrid, he said, Brian, there was no beetle pressure at all. There was nothing hitting the windshield. The plant was greener, was ahead in height as well. And when he went back to do his application at Tassel, he did not have to turn the sprayer on at all in that area because there was no insect pressure. There was nothing hitting the windshield at all whenever he went through with the sprayer. He said, so I just shut that off. And so, of course, I asked him if he wanted to pay us the additional money. He didn't have to spray on application there, and he didn't send me a check back. So I'm assuming he's going to keep that extra money in his pocket because of the control. Last year was a strong rootworm pressure for us in this area, based on the fact we had a very mild winter going in, and we had several hatches that went through. And so we've seen, as Allison talked about, the ISR response early and often. So we see it with the plant. So you see those late breaks as well, that you still see that control there. So whenever you look at a grower standard practice of trait or in furrow or both, this product is at the level of control and gives you that access as well. And this farmer is doing all of his corn acres this next year is going to be having the BioStealth and Provider PM product on it. So yield increase as well. I mean, we talk about the health and safety of the plant, but the yield increase is there. So you see significant increases with that. Allison's talking about the 5.6. We'll tell you that here in Eastern Iowa, it's substantially more than 5.6. So we appreciate that as well.
Well, and one of the things we've been busy with this last season is trying to really understand with this type of a mode of action, we feel possibly we could have benefits on other pests. So we spent all of this year doing assays with different partners, looking at above ground and below ground. If you had asked me a year ago if I thought there would be any sort of above ground repellency, I say, oh no, I mean, that's probably what we've only been focusing on below ground, right? So we spent this whole year doing assays, trying to understand what other crops and what other insect pests BioStealth would have an impact on. And then Roger this season, he's taking those hits to the field. And that's what's coming next is once we really get a handle on where to best position it in other crops, there's a EPA registration label expansion that's in process right now. And we'll be able to come to you next season with potentially other crops that you can use this technology on.
Hey, Allison, Jared had a question. Could you go back to the slide demonstrating the win rate and show the graph on how the win rate is determined? And then while you're doing that, is BioStealth genetically modified?
No, all of our microbes are naturally occurring. So we isolate them from plants in the environment in the contiguous US. So all 12,000 of them in our freezer are naturally occurring bacteria. So looking at all of these individual on-farm trials, performance is a straight average. So just looking at every single result and averaging it, the win rate, again, 72%, like looking pretty good. The win rate is anything that is above zero. What percentage of all the trials has an above zero win rate? An above zero response. And then the win performance is the average of everything over here that was a positive response. So when you do win, it's a 9 bushel per acre, and you win 72% of the time.
That's significant, right? And I really like that question, Jared, because when you have the pressure and when you have the performance, on those acres, it's a major ROI for us. And so this just improves our confidence as we go forward. And with that 81 set of trials included in this, it's fantastic results for us to have confidence in as we go on. And something to talk about briefly is that this win rate of 72% could be 3 out of 4 years, or it could be 3 out of 4 farms, or 3 out of 4 side by sides that someone tests. And so just as with other inputs that we work on, there's win rates. These kinds of things happen based on the variability of what we see in fields and different performances. What excites me about this technology further is when Brian tells the story with regards to not having to potentially spray for corn rootworm, that means that we're doing a significant reduction in the larvae that have been able to survive and then turn into the potential of laying eggs for the next season. So I think what's going to be shown over a period of years when using this is that we can drastically reduce the incidence of corn rootworms in our current fields as we rotate this. And as we continue to do that, I wonder, I'm not making a claim, I wonder if we could have some results similar to what we saw with the corn borers, that after 5 to 8 years of use of that, we saw a significant reduction in corn borers out there in the field in the early 2000s when that technology had been brought out in the mid to late 90s. So, um, Roger Bowman, you've scouted a lot of fields and you've probably seen this technology on different hybrids and different types of traded hybrids. Um, is there an opportunity for you to speak about what you've seen specifically on traded types of hybrids when you go out in the field and what it does on the traded hybrids, not just the conventional hybrids?
Yeah, and that's a good point. As we test across the Corn Belt, typically, once you get above Missouri into Iowa, further west, where we started having multiple emergences of both Western and Northern corn rootworm, um, we're seeing a lot of, I don't want to use the word failure, but we're seeing a lack of performance from the traits. And so as we do our testing across these fields, as I go look at fields out there, what used to work isn't working quite as well. And that's expected. I mean, when these are released, they have a certain timeline, a life expectancy. Um, it's a particular mode of action, and the insects are, getting around that with resistance. What this does is bring another mode of action out there. And so where we've been testing with traded, more the older traded corn, not the newest stuff that's out there, but the stuff that's starting to lose performance, we see a little, I should say, a nice little bump from adding the BioStuff product out there that gives it a little bit better efficacy. And we're hoping we'll extend that life span of those genes and traits. And of course, some of the phenotypes are varietal specific, but we do see with the traits that we are able to assist that and help them perform better without having to purchase the brand new genes out there that we think that's got a good place with the IPM toolbox.
Well, that's great to hear. One area that we want to bring up for whoever may be on the webinar today or who might listen in the future, we really see this technology as a key management tool for seed corn production. We've had some seed corn acres put to the test here with this product last year, and there was a drastic reduction in the amount of spraying, damage to the ends of the ears and the silks, and a significant enough yield advantage that the return was extremely good for the seed production person. Not all of the seed production inbreds may have a trait in them. And this really helped with better production, better quality production, and improve the standability of these seed corn hybrids in terms of in the production side. And so we'd invite any person listening that's in the seed corn production side, doing their inbreds and so forth, or creating the corn that we're going to harvest and put in the bag, get a hold of us, and we'd be happy to talk about those results, how you can implement it as a planter box technology so it makes it easy. We're not talking about having to over treat corn. And that's one of the things that we want to emphasize here, with Newfields Ag, that we're a worldwide leader in planter box technology, and we've helped reinvent the planter box space. And this technology really is democratized to be able to be used by all farmers with simple application in the planter box by using it with our dust product that we have it mixed with to deliver that to the planter box. And you can really get down to where you can apply it, test it, see it, or use it on all your acres. And we think you'll find that you can plant it with confidence with this 72% win rate. So we would entertain a couple more comments or any testimonials if you want to raise your hand before we end our presentation here today.
There's a comment in the chat, Michael.
Okay. One of the comments in the chat is that traits have a potential life expectancy in terms of their efficacy, and Roger talked about that a little bit. And so the concept of additional modes of action to help work with keeping technologies viable, I think is important. And stacking this on traits or with chemistries, or in some cases, people actually, we've heard, maybe are going back to a non-traded hybrid from a cost standpoint. And then in some cases, we're hearing that some of the non-traded hybrids or reduced number of traits hybrids genetically can outperform some of the full traded hybrids. So this, integrated pest management is something that's very important, and this really works into our plan. And when people say that they don't have to go spray chemicals on the crop and they save passes or a number of passes, that's just a big win for us in this cleaner, safer, greener area that we're operating in as we continue to work towards, one of our goals over time is how can we move away from chemistries on seed treatments to where we can use these biocontrols. And this won't be the last time that you'll see Allison and the team from New Leaf, because we've got exciting new microbes that they're advancing in their programs that is in testing with this. And we'll see that in 26 and 27 as we go forward. Hunter, I see that you have a question. You raised your hand. If you want to take yourself off mute, go ahead, sir.
I have a question for Allison. I was wondering if you know how or what exactly changes in the root CO2 molecule, because CO2 is such a simple molecule, and the plants they're still going to put it out there out of their roots just like they did before. But how does CO2 change? That's just crazy in my mind.
Well, so the CO2 doesn't change. That's a great question. So the CO2 is still being released by the roots because, yeah, it's respiration. Above ground plants bring in CO2 and then respire out oxygen. And then below ground, they're bringing in the oxygen and putting out CO2. So the CO2 absolutely is still being released from the roots into the soil environment. So the attractant Q is still there. What the plant also produces is a repellent. And it's a chemical that's volatile that is released from the roots and ends up in the air pockets in the soil. And that confuses the larvae's ability to sense the attractant. So the attractant is still there. It's not changing, but the plant has added a repellent to the mix. So the larvae are just not moving in that direction. They cannot respond to the carbon dioxide as they would typically. Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks.
All right. Thank you for that, Hunter. Well, with that, we will.
Oh, hold on just a second. Can I ask
Sure.
one more follow-up to that?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
What is that repellent called? Like, is there a name for it yet?
So we are working really hard with our collaborators on identifying that. So
Okay.
what our collaborators are doing is capturing the air within that system and running it through a full chemical analysis to see what is different in the BioStealth treated plants versus the non-treated plants. So that work is all very much in progress in terms of being able to say, okay, this single compound or these 5 compounds are only being produced in BioStealth treated corn or being produced at a higher rate in the BioStealth treated corn. All of that's in progress and coming soon. So we'll, as soon as we have that that full story ready to share, that will be part of this mode of action story for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Allison, Roger, thanks for your good insights today. And we'll invite you back in the future for other subjects and maybe a continuance of this. I want to let everyone know that they're welcome to go on Spotify or Apple and listen to our new podcast called Innovations in Your Fields. I think we've dropped 5 episodes now, and we have some people following us. Get a hold of your resellers or dealers and our sales reps about our discount programs, our replant program, and when you can get some of these products in your hand and get ready to use this spring. We'd ask you to take a look and watch your emails for next week's uh, webinar and invite others. If you find this of great value, invite others to this event. We continue to run this probably well into March each year. So with that, Allison, Roger, thanks for your time, and we'll catch you again.